This is Kim Campbell here from North Carolina. We're having a cloudy, rainy day. What I want to do is to create a really traditional Thanksgiving recipe that we love to cook in our home. So let's get started. You remember that traditional green bean mushroom casserole that we grew up on? And I don't know about you, but my mom used to use the cream of mushroom soup. She would use canned green beans, and then she would use the fried French onions in the can. And we all loved it because it was creamy and rich and it had salt, oil, and sugar in it. Well, this is a healthier version, and there's actually 3 parts to this recipe. The first part is we're actually going to create our own baked onion rings, which are delicious. Then we're going to make a sauce, which everybody loves, and you can use this sauce in a lot of other recipes as well. Then we're going to actually saute the mushrooms and the beans and put it all together. So let's get started with the onion rings. I've cut up a couple of onions. It depends on how big your onion is, but you might want 1 or 2 onions. Cut them up to be about 1/4 of an inch wide and then separate them. I'm going to bread these, and I love to bread vegetables. I like to bread things like zucchini, mushrooms, cauliflower. I start with a little bit of whole grain flour, and then it's about 1.25 cups, and then a cup of plant-based milk. I'm using soy milk for this one. And then whole wheat breadcrumbs. You can either make your own or you can buy them. I happen to toast these and grind them up. And then I'm going to season the breadcrumbs with some garlic powder and then onion powder. And salt if you prefer. You don't have to use much salt, or you don't have to use any sea salt at all. A little bit of nutritional yeast flakes. So this is really whatever you want it to be. Mix it up. If you want to add, Italian seasoning to it, or parsley, or smoked paprika, you can certainly do that. Take the onion ring, and we're going to dip it in the flour first. So I have it in the order that I'm going to go in. And this is going to get a little bit messy. That's okay. So just prepare your hands to get messy. Then I'm going to dunk it in the milk, and it almost creates a batter around the onion. And then we'll coat it with some breadcrumbs. And these are going to look rustic. They're not perfect. They're not like the ones you get out of the can, but boy, did they ever taste delicious. And I lined a cookie sheet with parchment paper. You can use a silicone mat, whichever you prefer. And then just start stacking them up. And when I make the onion rings, I tend to do more than one at a time because it speeds up the process a little bit. So we'll put these in the milk and then just really get them coated well. Stick them right in here, coat them well. These onions, when they cook, they caramelize a little bit, so they get really sweet. So I'll be back in a minute with the finished product. Set this in the oven at 425 degrees for about 10 minutes, and that's about exactly where you want them. They're a little bit kind of crispy, still soft and tender, because when they go on top of the casserole, they're going to get even crispier when you bake them. And we'll get started with step 2. The second component to this recipe is the sauce. I use this sauce for a lot of things. I use it to make scalloped potatoes with. I sometimes mix it with pasta. I put it on top of baked potatoes. It starts with about 1.5 cups of a plant-based milk. I'm using soy milk, but you can use almond milk or cashew milk, whatever works for you. About 1/2 cup of cashews. It's going to add some thickness to it. Cashews are slightly sweet, and it's really nice for this sauce because you want it to be creamy like your mother's canned cream of mushroom soup. I've got 3 garlic cloves, and then a couple of tablespoons of cornstarch. That'll also help thicken it too, because I don't want to rely just on cashews to create thickness. So we'll put that in the blender. And by the way, if you don't have a great blender, you don't have to have a Vitamix, but if you don't have a great blender, I would just soak your cashews. This is onion powder, about 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast flakes, and they will add a nice cheesy flavor to the sauce. I buy mine in bulk. A little bit of nutmeg, just a pinch, that's about 1/4 teaspoon. I did use a little bit of salt. It's about 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. You can omit that if you're salt sensitive. And then this is a little bit of vinegar. Vinegar's nice because if you use vinegar or lemon juice, it'll give it a really nice flavor without having to add salt to it. So We're going to put a little bit of apple cider vinegar in that, and then we're going to turn it on. It's not thick. It doesn't thicken until you heat it up, and we're going to put this in. We're not going to put it on the stove. We're just going to add it to the casserole, because when you put it in the casserole, it'll get thick and bubbly on its own. So we'll just set this aside, pour it all out. And then I recommend at this point that you just dip your finger in there or a spoon and taste it and see if you need to adjust it a little bit to your preferences. So the next step is to saute your mushrooms. If you have leftover onions and you want to throw that in there, you can certainly do that too. I'm going to get the pan really hot. I have about 12 ounces of sliced mushrooms. You can use any kind of mushroom. You can cut them as big or small as you prefer. You can see that they're starting to stick a little bit on the bottom of the pan. So I'm just going to use a little bit of white wine to deglaze the pan slightly. There's a lot of moisture in mushrooms, so you really don't need much of that white wine. But once they start to soften, there'll be quite a bit of liquid here. The alcohol from the white wine is not really a problem because it's gonna cook off. But if you're concerned about it, then you could also use vegetable broth. So I've got everything ready to go. I'm just going to put it together in a casserole pan. I've got my onions that are hopefully going to make it to the top. My daughter, my film lady here, and I have been munching on these. They're really good. I've got my green beans. I just bought frozen green beans. It's about 24 ounces. You can buy fresh or frozen, whichever you prefer. And then I just steamed them a little bit. We've got our sauce. And we've got our mushrooms, and I did something with the mushrooms because there's a lot of moisture in a mushroom. I drained off the liquid. You can use that for vegetable broth, because that's actually good. It's mushroom broth. It's good stuff. So we're going to put our mushrooms, we're going to mix them in with the green beans. It's funny, that casserole that my mom used to make, the only mushrooms that were in it were the mushrooms that were in the cream of mushroom soup. So this one just has a lot more to it. So mix it up. And then throw it in a casserole pan. It's kind of the perfect size pan. And you're going to take your sauce, because you don't really need to mix it. We're just going to pour it in. Pour it kind of evenly over the top. And you want to make sure you use all of it. And just kind of cover them on the top, and I use a lot. You're going to barely be able to see the green beans when I get through. And you're going to leave this in the oven at about 375, and you're going to bake it for 20 to 30 minutes because you want it to boil and bubble inside, because that's what's going to help to thicken that nice sauce. And we had a lot of extra onion rings, so I'm not telling, but I think we're going to have those for lunch. And you can actually see all the liquid that's coming up out of this. So, and we're good to go. We're going to go over to the oven, stick it in, and I'll be sure to share the end results. And we're off and running. I think the casserole is ready, and I want to make one correction. You need to cover it with tin foil, because I realized afterwards I wanted to really hold the heat in, so I covered it with tin foil for about 20-30 minutes, and then I took the tin foil off and left it in there for about 10 or 15 more minutes. Oh, it smells so good. And I love this recipe because it looks really wholesome. You can actually see the vegetables. I'll pull it up so you can actually get a view of what it looks like. Oh my goodness. Ooh, look at the nice cream sauce, and you can see that thickened in there beautifully. This is such an easy, delicious recipe. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Bye-bye.